Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Money Matters TV. My name is Dan White and I'm the host of your show this afternoon. I'm also president and CEO of Daniel White and Associates. We are a local retirement planning firm. We're headquartered in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. We also have a satellite office in Middletown, Delaware, and we work primarily with pre-retirees and retirees and generally just answering every question they might have as far as when to take Social Security, when to start drawing down on retirement accounts, how to generate retirement income, pretty much soup to nuts, Medicare, supplements, you name it, anything you have to deal with in retirement, that is something our office can do for you. And today I am joined on the show. My co-host is Keith Modzelewski. Keith is the program manager for Energize, Delaware. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk quite a bit about energy. I know we have a guest later on, Dani, Heise, and you guys are both in the energy space. So just tell me a little bit about Energize Delaware, if you could, Keith, and tell me what you guys are all about.
Sure. So Energize Delaware is a nonprofit in the state of Delaware. We were founded by legislation to be able to do energy efficiency and renewable energy projects throughout the state. We have about 25 programs under our portfolio that covers every industry sector from low income to the private resident through commercial, advanced manufacturing, and farming. And we provide rebates, grants, and loan opportunities for customers to be able to make their businesses, homes more energy efficient, reducing their cost of operating and giving them an opportunity to reduce their carbon footprint and be able to help out the environment while doing something good for their bottom line, for their pockets, and in your case, for their customers that are moving into retirement and trying to minimize their costs.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you talk about costs today. I mean, obviously that's top of the line for everybody with inflation. You know, we know inflation kind of ramped up to about 9% the early part of last year, and then the Fed's been raising rates, and it's good for savers because you're getting higher interest rates at the bank, but not necessarily for costs because everything else is going up. And I know, gas alone, when you're looking at, pushing $4 a gallon and they're talking about crude oil maybe hitting $100 a barrel. I mean, costs are at the top of everybody's mind. So what are ways that companies can combat kind of the rising cost of operations today?
Yeah, so one of the great things that we offer and that we recommend for any business, and this is not just for the state of Delaware where we operate, but across the country, is really looking at what are your energy savings opportunities. Most states have an energy efficiency program within their utility sector to be able to help manage and look at what the costs are that are driving in your business. What we're finding is HVAC, electricity are probably your two primary drivers in your house to be able, what is costing you money. And so by doing an energy audit on your house, you really can start to identify where these vampires are that are costing you the most money and then come up with solutions to be able to help solve that problem. We're seeing a lot of customers there's a huge demand and interest in solar right now. But one of the things that we like to push for this is rather than just go out and do solar, we like to do an energy efficiency audit first so that you size your solar correctly. So we want to come in before you do any of these energy improvements, look at the entire building that you're operating within, reduce your energy costs as much as possible, and then supplement it with a renewable energy like solar to be able to reduce that cost that you're operating under, or in some cases, even eliminate it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You talk about these vampires, that suck energy out of your house. We've been in our house 26 years. We just recently had to get our chimney repaired, and the guy says, "Do you have trouble lighting a fire?" We said, "Sometimes," because there's no insulation around the chimney. And I thought, oh, good Lord, I guess builders, they try to cut corners everywhere they can, and if they can save a buck here or there, that's what they do. But ultimately, it's going to cost the homeowner in the long run.
I think building science has just changed a lot over the last decade to 20 years. I mean, I'm in a 20-year-old home now, and we look at some of the stuff that we're finding in energy efficiency homes also. Like the technology has just changed, and we're more conscious and more aware of it with new buildings. And so a lot of retrofit is going back in and not fixing problems from during that building process. It's just technology has changed. So it's now bringing things up to the new technology standard.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we all remember as kids, your parents, turn the light off, when you leave the room and shut the door. What do you think? We're heating the whole outdoors, that kind of thing. And but I guess it's not only that doing the physical things you can do reduce costs, but also making sure your house is up to speed as far as like they say, these energy audits and where you're leaking.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when we went through and did an energy audit at my own house, essentially they found that when they did a test on my doors and windows, I basically had about a 2 foot by 2 foot hole that was just sucking air out of my house at all times because of all the leaks that I had. So once I was able to go through and fix that, it just automatically was helping with my energy efficiency. I mean, I was dealing with a 20-year-old hot water heater. That was a huge energy savings when I upgraded that. And then putting solar on just continued to reduce my operating costs and, really stabilized what was an uncertain budget for month to month just because of the cost of electricity.
Right, right. So what do you see as the landscape for renewable energy and what would be the potential benefits for commercial properties?
So residential and commercial are two entirely different animals there. But for commercial properties, the rebates and grants that are out there have gotten really, really good. And so for commercial properties, depending on the region you're in, you can see a payback in under a year. Most of them are probably in the 3-year mark, but you're able to make some pretty large investments into this technology, get a lot of it paid for, put some of it into loans, and put others into grants. And after you've offset what you're paying for your electricity, it's covering for itself in spades and just continuing to pay for itself over time because as you started off with, inflation is happening. Well, inflation's happening very highly in the electricity industry as well and how we create power. And so if you can mitigate that at your own business or at your own house, it's just going to further help you into the future as costs continue to rise.
So do you see the government, actively kind of participating in this with kind of rebates and tax credits and that type of thing?
So the tax credits for sure, the rebates that are coming are part of the government programs as well. There's also utility scale that is offering incentives out there. So it's coming from the private sector as well with the utilities being able to try and balance out their portfolios and looking for ways to adopt renewable energies. And so this balance of where our energy is coming from is being incentivized by the utilities at businesses to be able to do this as well.
And then I guess the last thing, we're starting to see on the highways and the byways, we're starting to see more electric vehicles. It seems to be the wave of the future. My concern, and we were talking before we came on the air, is what's the range for these? And you said 300 to maybe 350 miles, and the concern would be, all right, I'm heading to Ohio and I'm on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and, I go 300 miles and I'm dead. And where's the next charging station? So how can the push for electronic vehicles become like kind of a marketing technique for businesses?
Yeah, so that's actually a huge opportunity there for these businesses. So when you're looking at this, there is a lot of room in this landscape for businesses to be able to install chargers in their parking lots. And all that is doing is driving traffic to your location. Once you install a car charger, almost all of the different brands of car chargers have their networks that you get plugged into. Google has its own map system that shows you where car chargers are located. And for a business, you can charge just like you would for a parking meter for when somebody parks in front of a car charger to charge for it. But it's also driving people into your retail location. And so it's, what's going to happen is somebody's going to sit there and charge their car for half an hour, 45 minutes while they're wandering through your store. It's just driving traffic in a new and innovative way.
Yeah, you don't really think about it from that aspect, but that is a good point. So we did have a question from a listener, Roy Jackson out of Paoli. He asked the question, what are the best power plants that produce electricity as to the cost for the general public?
So there isn't one clear, concise answer for that problem. There isn't one, overarching solution that's going to say this is going to be the power plant that's going to solve all the world's problems. It's always going to be a blend of where the utility companies are getting energy from, in my opinion. There's renewables. Solar is great, but it's only going to provide power during certain periods of the day. Wind is great because wind is going to produce clean energy, but you have to have the wind blowing. So there's going to always be this blend of where energy is coming from. The rates are starting to come down from all these different sources here. And I think the big change we're going to start to see is when batteries become a utility scale size to be able to capture some of these renewables and be able to use them in off-peak times. But until that happens, it's going to be really interesting to see how this continues to drive across the country, because I don't think there's ever going to be one clear winner, because it constantly is going to be a blend based off when on demand is and where is that power coming from, and how are you actually buying, how are the utility companies able to buy the power from different producers at different times.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great answer. And like you say, there is no tried and true, this is the best. I mean, it all depends on where they're getting it from. If any viewers out there do have questions for any of our guests on the program, here's how you can send your questions into us.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our hosts and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
All right, so it is my great pleasure now to continue along this vein of thought about energy today to introduce our guest, Dani Heise, who is a senior program manager with Franklin Energy Services. She has been in the energy efficiency industry for 16 years. She's worked with 31 utilities across the country on various programs, kind of a resident expert, if you will. Welcome to the show, Dani.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to have you on. So I don't know if you were listening, but Keith and I were talking about, the electronic vehicles and the solar panels and where do you really see? I mean, I can't believe we'll ever live in a world where there won't be oil. You guys might tell me different. So
you're not the only one that's thinking that way. I have to tell you. There are others like you as well that can't really see that. But I mean, it is the hot topic of today. Where are we going? What's next? How are we going to get there? Those are the questions that we're asking ourselves. And you hit on several of those. Solar is a way, wind is a way, EV, and electrification of the home. That is really where we're headed in the next steps of, I'd say, with the next 5, 10, 15 years, what you're going to see, especially with these energy master plans that are being put into place.
So it's kind of interesting when we talk about these different types of energy production systems. Before the show, we were talking about, I have a place down the Jersey Shore, and they're proposing the wind turbines down in the ocean. And I'll tell you, everybody is up in arms, like, we can't have this. It's terrible. Signs everywhere, get rid of these things. What's your guys' position on that?
So I think wind is one of those technologies that people don't truly understand. And it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when. And if the offshore wind that's coming into New Jersey wants to continue to fight back against it, somebody else is going to buy those rights to develop those areas offshore, and the power just won't go to your state to be able to take advantage of that. We face some of that in New Jersey or in Delaware as well. But it's a technology that's coming. It's a technology that's reliable out in the Midwest. And I think it's just a matter of time before it really hits its mainstream adoption here on the East Coast. And when you really start to look at scale of what you're going to see offshore versus what when the wind turbines are up there, it's no more affecting your view or your experience on the beach than one of the cargo ships going up the Delaware Bay right now. It's going to look smaller than those blocking your view.
It's kind of interesting. So when you talk about these different types of energy production, I know for years, we talked about gambling in Pennsylvania. And if we legalize gambling, all this revenue will come in and we'll put it toward property taxes and everybody's property taxes will go down. Well, now we have all this gambling, but I don't see any property taxes going down. So I guess my point is, if we can come up with all these alternative sources of energy, do you really see that driving the cost of energy down?
Well, I mean, Keith can speak to this as well as I can. The number one thing I think people started to see that happen was with solar. So people that would get solar systems on their house. So there would be multiple ways that they would be in reduction, right? The first way would be if they got credits, right? So that would be part of it. If they also paid less, so like let's say the system was $30,000 for the house, and when it first came out, you would get, let's say, a $15 or $15,000 credit from the state, or rebate, instant rebate. And the third way is that once the system gets put on the house, I've had many, many, many people report to me as I've been out in the field and I've met with customers one-on-one and at many of our outreach events, that they're paying, the meter is rolling back. And because that is putting back into the grid, they're paying pennies on the dollar on their bill, or they're getting a credit back on their bill.
That's interesting. I think that's ultimately, from a consumer standpoint, I think that's what consumers want to see. Okay, I'm willing to lay out some cash here, but I got to see what the payback period is, and when am I going to recoup some of these costs? And
yes, I just want to add it to that too, that it's very important if somebody is going to do solar that they have the right size system, because you could potentially undersize or oversize a house. And the way to figure that out is I highly recommend that everyone gets an energy audit on their home first, so that they can figure out it's not just about one project. It's not just about solar. And that's what I was talking about with an electrified home. It's really about having a whole home approach. That's what we strive to do with Energize Delaware and throughout the state of Delaware and many other states as well. You want to look at the house as a whole system. So if you start with the audit, like Keith was mentioning before, that he got in his home, and you see, do you need your electric panel upgraded because you want to get an EV charger potentially, or you want to get a solar system, or maybe you want to go from oil to a heat pump, water heater, or a heat pump, right? And in order to know all of that, that's really where you're going to figure out how much am I going to be spending and how much am I going to have in reduction in the payback as well. But where do you really have those needs if you're looking at the whole picture? So the assessment is the first step.
Yeah.
And that's just not for small business or for homes. This is for any type of business that's looking at an energy performance upgrade. You really want to look at this as a holistic approach, not as a piecemeal approach, because fixing one problem isn't necessarily going to fix all of the problems. So you want to figure out what's that right balance of all of the areas that you need to address, and address them in a way that's going to help solve the problem over a longer period, as opposed to the immediate knee-jerk fix today.
So from a business perspective with you guys, what percentage would you say from an energy standpoint do you deal with the residential public, and what percentage do you deal with commercial businesses?
I would say our breakdown right now is about 60% residential, 40% non-residential.
Okay. All right. And you had brought up a great point, Keith. I know, and maybe they have these and I just haven't noticed because I don't have an electric vehicle, but I'm thinking about Wawa. I mean, Wawa's got the perfect setup, right? You stop, you put the hose in your tank, and you go get a sandwich and a coffee. They could do the same
Sure.
thing. They had all the EV chargers there. You just, go have a cup of coffee and charge your vehicle, So I don't know. I don't know if
Absolutely.
I've seen them at Wawa, but maybe somebody ought to bring that up to them.
So, Wawa has adopted Tesla as their car charging partner. But it's still a challenge because most vehicles don't use that type of charger. And so recently there's been announcements of partnerships with a lot of the other major auto manufacturers that they're going to be able to start using the Wawa charging system for other EVs. But one of the challenges you run into right now is if you have another brand of EV, finding those chargers can be harder because they don't have the infrastructure in place yet. And it's coming right now. It's really starting to see that you can find chargers in lots more locations that have universal plugs on them. So you have this opportunity to be able to adopt an EV and not have this range fear that people used to have.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing. I mean, my gosh, it's kind of like cell phones, If you drove somewhere and finally we found a charger and it's not the right kind,
Yep.
what do you do then? It's it's like, oh my gosh, we're stranded. So what capability? I mean, I guess they're building this infrastructure more and more all the time. I mean, how far advanced would you say they are as far as the charging stations and so forth?
So I think in a lot of cases, you can find charging stations throughout the country right now. I think you can track and go from coast to coast using an EV and find chargers that are functioning today. I think it's just going to continue to find that you're going to have greater density of charging opportunities as the technology gets adopted more. I was talking with somebody the other day. They took their vehicle from Dover up to Canada multiple times and had no issues with their EV getting back and forth and finding chargers, but it was a different type of route. So they planned a route ahead of time that followed a charging network so that they could do that. Similar to, what you used to do with gas vehicles. You'd figure out what your route was going to be and plan your strategic stops to get gas along the way. It's just a different type of how you're doing route planning now. And the GPS and software systems that are available in cars has adopted to that and will help you along with doing that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they've developed apps that you can just download and say where the next charging station is and all that kind of thing. So,
Yes.
So, Dani, what's your biggest advice that you would give to a homeowner that is looking at energy efficiency or just, comes to you and says, I'm going to go get solar tomorrow? What would you say to them, or what would your advice be?
Sure. Thank you for that. That's an excellent question, because sometimes people do come for one thing and it turns out that that's actually not the thing that they need the most. So as I mentioned before, the home performance, which is non-income qualified, there's an assisted home performance program for qualified and also first responders that they can take advantage of, additional incentives. There's a low to moderate income program, and then there's a small business program as well. If they already are, let's say, working with a contractor in the field, and that contractor will tell them, they should tell them, I hope that they tell them, their first step is that they have to contact our office, because they need, if they wanted to be able to participate in incentives and rebates, they have to be able to go through our office and be able to put in a rebate reservation so that their job will be applicable. That is the very first, whether you're getting solar, whether you want to get a heat pump water heater, whether you decide that you just want to upgrade your system, whether you want to get insulation and air sealing, any one of that, anything that has to deal with the envelope of the house, you contact us first. We've even had people come in our low to moderate income and they have health and safety issues. We have helped people connect with other programs like LIHEAP.
And actually, that's an interesting question. So if we have any contractors that are looking at this program, I mean, is it hard to become a verified contractor with Energize Delaware? What does that process look like? Because I don't get to see that process.
Yes, if someone is watching this and they are interested in becoming a participating contractor within the network, I highly recommend that they contact us and ask us what those steps are. It is not a hard process whatsoever. We do have a system in place for them to be able to onboard. There is training that's provided by our team and our staff. And then we have additional trainings as well once you are here and you do become a participating contractor, that are ongoing trainings to make sure that you have all the tools in your toolbox. I will tell you, there is a great need, and I know we haven't touched on this at all, and maybe this is a conversation for another time, but workforce development is the number one thing on everyone's minds. And we hope that people, youngsters, the youth, would be very interested in getting into energy efficiency, because it is a very robust and long path for them to take part in. And we are in desperate need of contractors of all shapes and sizes, of all ethnicities, to come and be part of our programs. So we highly recommend, contact us, and we'll tell you how to get started.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, so I guess to recap this, what I'm hearing is, if anybody is considering some energy efficiency, rather than just run out and say, I'm going to get solar panels, or I'm going to get this, or I'm going to get that they really ought to have somebody come through the property and do an energy audit, see what you need, where you need it, where you might be able to save some money. To me, from what I'm hearing, that's the first step before you do anything, is really find out what program would best fit your needs.
Absolutely. And we really try and steer you through the course of the programs and help you navigate this. This is a hand-holding process that gets you through it, because this is a confusing landscape with a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different programs that are involved in it. And we want to be the place that you're coming to help get navigated through, whether it's through our program or any of the other programs that are existing in the state of Delaware, to help navigate through this transition period as you're going through your energy savings journey.
Yeah, and it kind of sounds like it's kind of neat that any contractors that you have, it's almost like continuing education or recertification. You keep them up to speed with the latest tools and techniques.
Absolutely.
Yes,
and then
we do.
For anybody that isn't looking to, put a lot of cash into these programs, we provide grants and rebates. And I will tell you, we are the only loan institute that I'm aware of that hasn't raised interest rates so far. So we're continuing to provide low interest loans for both residential and commercial to be able to afford these upgrades and be able to help them pay for these upgrades through the energy savings that they're getting.
Great. Well, I want to thank both Keith and Dani for joining us on the program today. It was a very enlightening discussion about energy. I appreciate your attendance. We're just about out of time. Our next guest on the next edition of Money Matters will be David Owens. He's a general partner with Bowman's Tower Ventures Partners, LLC. And he'll be talking a little bit about what they do in our next episode. So this wraps it up for today. I want to thank you for joining Money Matters, and hopefully tune in for our next episode next time. Have a great day.